Welcome to Last Waft Tonight. This is the second part of the previous video focused on wolves and their unquestionable majesty. I'll be your host, Wolfgang Doghouse, and while my love for John Oliver might come off as concerning, disturbing, and psychologically questionable, it is sincere. Let me show you what it really means to be waffled about, you dishy little man. Why settle for bog wabbit Yorkshire pudding when you can have an undiluted wolf in your crumpet instead, you deliciously snacky peng? Moving on. So in part 1 of our wolf episodes, we discussed lots of wild things that make wolves so heckin' awesome. From our incredible senses, our pivotal role in the environment, and some of our natural history. Speaking of which, it's believed that the first gray wolf likely appeared approximately 1 million years ago somewhere in Eurasia before migrating to North America about 750,000 years ago. They also coexisted with dire wolves for about 400,000 of those years. Pretty neat, huh? Just another amazing fact about an outstanding creature. But I could talk about how awesome wolves are for days, weeks, years even, and still leave far too much unsaid. Alas, we have to talk about the more frustrating parts in the legislation around wolves now, but I promise to make it as, fun and informative as I can. We also have to talk about the current challenges wolves are facing in the United States, which are dire. No, dire wolves aren't coming back. Sorry for those of you who like a challenge. 2009 was a rough year for wolves. Not only did we lose a legend and one of the best and most devoted wolf biologists in the world, Gordon Haber, but also wolves illegally had their protections removed from the ESA by the then Secretary of Department of Interior's Ken Salazar, a man who looks like a can of Spam trying to impersonate Elmer Fudd. Today the Department of Interiors is run by Deb Haaland, and while I used to think that Salazar was the worst person to head the DOI, I'm thinking that Haaland has taken that title. But we won't have time to talk about her in this episode. But stay tuned because she's definitely someone that needs to be talked about and removed from office. Anyways, the 2009 delisting is an important topic for many reasons. Since the Wolf Protection Act in 1960, and later under the newly formed Endangered Species Act of 1974, wolf protections have constantly been challenged by ranchers and hunters. Ranchers claim that wolves prey on their livestock, while hunters claim that wolves would harm deer populations. Both attempt to use these arguments to remove all wolf protections, and subsequently, all wolves from their regions. Neither of these arguments have worked out well for them because they simply aren't valid. As we've just discussed in part 1, wolves benefit deer and ungulate populations, not the other way around. Acclaimed wolf biologist Doug Smith, who recently retired from the National Park Service in Yellowstone with over 28 years of service, even commented on this, stating that while Yellowstone may have fewer elk in the park prior to wolf reintroductions, that the elk in Yellowstone are the healthiest elk in the nation because they are managed by wolves. Hunted that is. With much more success than my hunt for John Oliver's OnlyFans page. Seriously, why isn't this the first result that comes up on my Google searches? Instead, I get BetterHelp ads, which clearly have nothing to do with it. What's a wolf need to do to see John mowing the lawn and some checkered knee highs? Where were we? Alright. Do you know how many elk are in these states? Just elk. Well, there are about 120,000 in Idaho, 175,000 elk in Montana, and 117,000 in Wyoming. But 3,200 wolves in the entire tri-states are going to make it all collapse? It's not even possible. To top it off, the same year they killed 300 wolves in Montana, the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks of that state released a report that showed that elk populations were critically high. Their goal is 93,000, so that's an 82,000 difference. But they want to remove predators that balance elk populations? Their population goal is 300 with 10 breeding pairs in all 3 states combined. In regards to livestock predation, wolves account for less than 1% of all predation losses. Domestic dogs actually account for more than wolves. Even that figure is inflated though, because the USDA who reports it includes probable losses, and self-reported surveys that ranchers can put whatever number they think or want on it and face little to no scrutiny to their claims. In fairness, however, I admit that some ranchers have had their livestock targeted more than others. But these ranchers also fail to implement much, if any, depredation deterrents such as flottery, which are those little red flags you might have seen before that hang from fences. They also often don't employ trained dogs who will chase off unwanted predators, physically monitor the grazing lands by simply jumping on an ATV or riding a horse along the perimeter, or even remove carcasses of deceased livestock that likely fell victim to the elements or other health-related malady completely unrelated to predators. Ranchers will often blame wolves, coyotes, and other predators for those losses too, simply because they see that the carcass has been consumed, partially consumed, or they happen to catch them eating it on the rare occasions that they do maintain and survey the grazing lands, even if the corpse has been laying there for weeks, which is often the case. It's worth noting that losses incurred due to wolf predation are financially reimbursed as well. The problem is that they usually don't require any of these responsible tools that promote coexistence to be met, including removing carrion from the grazing areas, which attracts all sorts of predators and creates unhealthy habits and dependencies. But anyways, wolves had their protections removed in 2008, and hunting began in 2009 in the northern Rocky Mountains and western Great Lakes regions. So Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. Now where is Yellowstone National Park located? That's right. Right on the corner of Wyoming and dipping into Idaho and Montana. Wyoming's largest commodity happens to be cattle, which outnumber people by a factor of 2 to 1 at roughly 1.3 million head of cattle raised per year. There's also about 2.1 million head of cattle in Idaho and 2.6 million head of cattle in Montana, which is 3 cattle to every 1 person for that state. You know how many livestock businesses are in those 3 states? About 22,800 of them, 11,400 in Montana alone. Fancy that. So when the wolf restoration to Yellowstone was first proposed, you can imagine the opinions of these ranchers. Some even claim that the entire reintroduction program was illegal and government overreach. It's not, by the way. No more than the EPA making it illegal to pour out antifreeze into the soil as opposed to taking it to a facility that can properly dispose of it. It's not about them or their land, even if they privately own it or not. It's about the environment and everything else downstream which is negatively affected by their selfish actions. But yes, they did not want wolves there to begin with, and they have continually rallied against the science to the point of completely disregarding it. Allow me to elaborate on that point. The wolf reintroduction program was at its height in the late 1990s. In the first few years, and with only a few hundred wolves in the tri-state region, ranchers and hunters were already voicing their complaints and demanding that the wolf be delisted. Every year they would challenge the courts, claiming that there were too many wolves and that they were harming their livestock and game population, largely deer and elk. Every year they were declined, and after over a decade of bringing the same unscientific and rejected claims, they just up and removed them with the help of actors like Ken Salazar and Butch Otter. No, he's not the sexy otter like John Oliver. God, I just want to lick those 5 p.m. stubbles so bad. Where were we? Oh, right. Butch isn't his real name either, but maybe if we had the name Clement Leroy Otter, we'd want to change it too. But Butch? Clearly this man has a lot of insecurities and feels like he's got something to prove. It should be noted that this televangelist and used car salesman looking piece of crap has received over $800,000 in campaign contributions during his tenure just from the agriculture sector. Another $800,000 from real estate and $500,000 from energy and natural resources as 3 of the top 4 largest contributors. The 4th is general business, and who knows exactly what that means in Idaho. But $660,000 isn't small potatoes either. That was a joke about spuds. There's a lot of wolf taters in Idaho. Haters, that is. Though before we move on from the gargantuan shit stain that is Clement Leroy Otter, you should know that his net worth is roughly $13 million, and he's a businessman. Can you guess what business? That's right! He owns Go Ranch Incorporated, a cattle ranching operation in Idaho, and this is America, where we allow the people governing our country to be personally invested in the businesses they're writing laws for. 'Cause that makes sense. What could go wrong? But hey, I've been going at it for a good bit now, and I'm sure you're getting a little stressed out from all of this garbage. So check this out. Look at these puppies. Heckin' adorable, right? Sometimes you just gotta stop and reflect on the puppers. Breathe in. Breathe out. See? You can almost smell them. Smells like fermented puppy milk burps. And if you were a canine like me, that would mean something. Something good. Ah, that's better. Let's continue on. I want to wrap up the 2009 delistment and move on to the current matters at Paul. I know this has been hard to get through and follow along with because these are really stressful and complicated topics, but I want to thank you all for making it this far. You just can't easily discuss what happened in 2008 through 2011 in regards to wolves without talking about a lot of history and special interest. If this was easy to explain, they wouldn't need a lawyer heading the United States Fish and Wildlife Service like Martha Williams is today. And by the way, that's not even legal. Pursuant to the 2014 U.S. Code, Title 16, Chapter 9, Section 742B, no individual may be appointed as a director unless he is, by reason of scientific education and experience, knowledgeable in the principles of fisheries and wildlife management. Martha Williams is not formally educated in any field of wildlife biology, terrestrial or aquatic. Again, she's a lawyer, so she definitely understands this breach of law. She also happens to be an avid hunter who served as legal counsel to the Montana Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks from 1998 through 2011. You know, during the time when Ken Salazar, Clement Leroy Otter, John Tester, and other deplorable actors were illegally removing wolf protections in the tri-states. We haven't even begun to talk about John Tester yet. This is another notable loser who, once wolf protections had been restored after finding it was illegal by Judge Donald Malloy, tacked a rider onto a completely unrelated bill for budget cuts that stripped wolves of their protections once again. This was the first time in U.S. history that an animal was removed from the ESA by an act of Congress. And who would have guessed that he's also a hunter with a farm and ranching interest? Oh, and he also likes to shoot prairie dogs for fun and recreation on his 1,800 acres of land that he owns in Montana. You know, because in his sadistic mind they're just objects to be used for his entertainment. But let's not forget that he's a steward of the land, and not just some ultra-rich entitled sack of crap who inherited his wealth and power as those lying eco-activists and people slightly smarter than Tester would have you believe. Which is not a high bar, by the way. I mean, the guy got in a fight with a meat grinder. He lost. 3 fingers. Now, a lot of these ultra-rich and ultra-powerful dirtbags have the means to privately own the land they graze their cattle on. The thing is that much of the cattle grazing in the tri-states of the topic occur on public lands. These are all of our lands, but ranchers get to rent it out from us in a manner of speaking, and they often pay only $1.35 a month per head of cattle, half of that for calves. That's a fraction of the cost compared to ranching operations on private land. That's not to say they're much better when concerning their environmental impact, though. By the way, the $1.35 fee was implemented as a means to attempt to use those funds to offset their environmental damages. But anyone with a shred of objectivity can see how this is far from enough to cover those costs. It costs more to feed a goldfish per month than one of their heifers. Now what the heck is up with that? We're basically paying ranchers to destroy our public lands and all the wildlife within it. Not to get too far off topic, but we're even paying some ranchers $5 per animal per day to hold wild horses and burros in abysmal conditions. They too are being targeted and cleared to make room for more cattle. All of the forces who are destroying our wilderness and targeting wolves are the same ones who are targeting wild horses and burros. Minus the hunting industry. But you know they would if they could get away with it. These poor bastards have to go to other countries to shoot zebras, and they have to be really discreet about it too, or people start judging them. Don't they know that it's legal to do that there? And that makes it A-OK, right? Right. Anyways. So let's recap real quick. The population of wolves in the northern Rocky Mountains and western Great Lakes is not too high, and never has been because wolves self-regulate. So even before the western colonization of America and their concerted effort to extirpate all predators and perceived obstacles to their financial agendas, wolf populations couldn't be too high. After years of failed attempts to challenge wolf protections, the tri-states in this region delisted wolves from the ESA anyways, and this was found to have been illegal. Wolves were rightfully placed back onto the ESA in 2010, only to be removed again shortly thereafter as a rider proposed by John Tester on an unrelated bill aimed at saving money in 2011. Since then, wolf protections have been greatly weakened, and their status has bounced back and forth from endangered, threatened, and stable. This status is determined based on data collected from entities such as the USDA and the U.S. Fish and Game, whose goals greatly conflict with what sound science regarding wolves and their effect on the environment clearly demonstrate. Fast forward to more recent times. Just before the Trump administration left office, thank Wolfen, they removed gray wolves from the ESA in all states, leaving it up to each of the states to decide how to best manage their wolves. And honey, I don't belong to anybody but Gaia, and certainly don't need your corrupt management. This removal was illegal because in order to make any changes to a species' status on the ESA, a status review must be first conducted. The wolf status review of that region hasn't been updated since 2017. Remember Martha Williams? Well, she happened to still be working for Montana's Fish, Wildlife, and Parks up until 2020, when she then took the head of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the ones responsible for conducting these status reviews. Wolves continue to be unprotected in the tri-states, and still no review has been conducted. To top it off, all species listed on the ESA must have a formal status review every 5 years, even if there's no change to their listing status. This was due at the beginning of last year, and even extended up until September. So here's two very clear examples of how this is illegal. It's not nitpicking, it's federal U.S. code, which is redundant to say it that way, but feels like you need to say it that way? We haven't even begun to discuss red or Mexican wolves yet either, or the ridiculous myth about the Canadian wolf. Basically, some very ignorant people are suggesting that the gray wolves in Canada are different from the ones native to the United States, and that these wolves are the ones who were introduced here. They claim that Canadian wolves are larger, often 200 pounds, and more aggressive. Okay, so the wolves who were introduced to the United States did indeed come from Canada, but they aren't generally larger than any of the wolves here, nor are they more aggressive. But I don't know. What do you think, Seth Rogen? Are Canadians more aggressive? But alright. I'll be fair and we'll take a quick look at that argument more objectively. First thing first, there is currently no recognized difference that would merit a separate subspecies listing. Gray wolves in Canada and the gray wolves in the western Great Lakes and Rocky Mountain regions of the USA are both known as Canis lupus in their binomial or scientific name. In regards to behavior, while dogs may all come from Canis lupus and do show very distinct differences in personalities between breeds that can be expected, they have been selectively bred, often for thousands of years, to have these traits. Wolves are not selectively bred by humans, so any personality difference would develop independently, and there's no reason that would merit such a difference in personality based on their natural evolution in these regions, which took place over hundreds of thousands of years. The mannerisms and personality traits of wolves vary greatly, and we cannot assume that they will have the typical traits like we do with breeds of domestic dogs. So let's just throw that whole Canadian wolves are larger and more aggressive argument right out the window. Defenestrate it. It's a good word and I hardly get to use it. Don't judge me. Moving on. Let's talk a little bit about red and Mexican wolves. The Rouge wolf is one of the most endangered animals in the world, with only 10 known to exist in the wild. The good news is that there is about 240 of them in captivity, so we could reintroduce them. There are a few places like the Endangered Wolf Center in Eureka, Missouri, who breed endangered wolves with the goal to reintroduce them back into the wild. Generally speaking, you can't reintroduce wolves who have grown accustomed to and often dependent on humans. The way these types of places do it is by taking wolf pups to known wild wolf dens and having them adopted by a new pack. This has proven to be very successful because the new mothers are elated to take on the stray pups. We've done this before and we can do it again. As a matter of fact, most all Mexican and red wolves living in the wild come from the Endangered Wolf Center. So these reintroduction programs really have proven themselves in their ability to be successful. Before these reintroductions, there was only 9 Mexican wolves living in the wild. Today, there are just under 200 lobos. The same could be said for red wolves. Before their reintroduction, there were only 17 left in the wild. So why are there fewer red wolves post-reintroduction programs than when they first started reintroducing them? Why has the program been successful for one type of wolf, but not the other? Well, to keep it simple, the program has been successful. The methods work. But state and federal management has been incredibly irresponsible. Populations peaked at over 130 individuals, but then went down to 10 in a matter of years. Red wolves are often mistaken as coyotes due to their size, and when the laws regarding coyote hunting loosened, including allowing night hunting in recovery areas, all the progress made was lost. Of course, any concern for mistaken identity is just a cop-out. I highly doubt many ranchers and predator hunters care whether or not the animal they are killing is a wolf or a coyote. Their only concern would be which one could get them in trouble if they were caught. But the laws were designed to give them this easy out, so it was impossible to enforce. Now, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service has abandoned its red wolf reintroduction program, but they say they'll attempt to reintroduce them again. I wouldn't hold your breath, though. They've been saying that for years, when demanded to say anything about it at all, of course. Places like the Endangered Wolf Center are ready and waiting, but with a corrupt lawyer who loves hunting and hates wolves heading the Fish and Wildlife Service, I wouldn't count on that happening. All the more reason to get Martha Williams out. If we don't do something, Rouge and Cedar here might be the last ones we'll ever see, and I'm pretty sure they're gay, so they'll need help being reintroduced. Back in the wild. Yeah. Mexican wolves aren't necessarily fully protected either. 200 is not a stable gene pool, but lately the United States Fish and Wildlife Service has been touting its great success, while remaining silent on reds and avoiding discussions of biodiversity or any criticisms at all, really. Lobos will need additional wolves reintroduced outside of their common gene pools. Working more with the country of Mexico's wolf restoration initiatives could help with this. Still, though, the United States Department of Agriculture's Wildlife Service sets out to kill as many wolves as possible, placing traps to kill indiscriminately, hunting from helicopters, and baiting kill zones. I hate to say it because they'll take it like a compliment, and I assure you, it is not. But they're like lone rangers who operate above the law, including federal. Much of it is still illegal, but they always have politicians in their pockets, and these politicians have investments in ranching and hunting. They write laws or push to pass laws that will serve their interest, and veto or delay for as long as possible those which don't. But that's what you get when you have a government ruled by commercial interest. That's a whole other discussion which I plan on getting into further in a broader sense at a later time, though. Moving on. Carter Niemeyer was a former trapper employed by the USDA's Wildlife Services for 10 years, and also a wolf recovery coordinator for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services for 6 years. He goes on to say that he was just a hired gun of the livestock industry while he was employed with the USDA, and that it's just a bunch of politicians reinforcing a bunch of mercenaries who are having a grand old time killing wolves. In regard to 2009, when wolves were illegally removed from the Endangered Species Act, and entire packs were wiped out, including Yellowstone originals like the Cottonwood pack who just happened to wander too far. Carter says that it was a state-sanctioned outburst of revanchist political aggression and revelry. Facts and evidence didn't matter. After 2.5 decades of seeing their perceived political opponents have their way, the new mindset was vengeance. It's retribution time. Hell with science, hell with anything. We like to kill wolves. Today, Niemeyer is viewed as an ally to wolves. This is because he's been a whistleblower for the inner thinkings and activities of the USDA and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. He also speaks at seminars to help educate people about wolves. He's also responsible for more wolf killing than any other government official, and personally, I can't ever forgive him for that. But I greatly appreciate him exposing the corruption in these government entities, so I have respect for his current work. Anyways. Puppies! Wow! Look at those puppies! Haha! Yeah, we like puppies. Especially those that are still alive and not being gassed in their dens. Oh! Did I ruin the stress break? Damn, I'm bad at this. But hey, you try making this shit funny. Puppy burps. Not gas. Puppy burps. Not gas. Okay. Feeling better? Yeah, me too. By now you can probably tell, if it's not already obvious enough, that I have no love for ranchers and sport hunters. I'm beyond tired of them and their ways. But I've got plenty of reasons to feel this way about them. They don't respect science they don't agree with, and they certainly don't respect nature, despite their claims. For them, everything must bend to their will. It's high time to say enough is enough, and to get these freeloading ranchers off our public lands and start rewilding the Midwest. You don't restore nature by taking away the cornerstone pieces that hold it all together. But again, these are people who just hate wolves and don't care what anyone has to say about that. With bumper stickers that read, "Smoke a pack a day," that has a wolf and a crosshair. Signs outside of cafes and RV and pizza lodges that read, "Tag a wolf, get a free pizza and a pitcher of beer." Like, what kind of Beverly Hillbilly shit is this? And comments like, "I don't need some Washington bigwigs telling me what to do." Do they continue to deserve our respect?
These people are so dumb and hateful. They are even killing dogs thinking that they are wolves, like Amber Barnes, a 36-year-old sociopath who shot and skinned a husky, then posted pictures of her posing with it like some deranged psychopath on social media. Only after people told her it was a husky did she realize her mistake, but she still doubled down on it, saying that she feared for her life and she'd do it again. Right now, Alaska, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and the eastern side of Oregon all allow wolf hunting. Wolves have never been protected in Alaska, with the exception of not being allowed to poison them. Aerial gunning is only legal by government officials, like the State Fish and Game and the USDA in states with livestock. But Montana actually contests this and says that aerial gunning is legal in their state to all, despite it being federally illegal to unauthorized people.
Minnesota and Wisconsin went on to allow wolf hunting due to the Trump administration's federal removal of gray wolves from the ESA. They grabbed their guns and opened up on wolves for the first time in decades. Wisconsin was so eager to kill wolves that they murdered over 216 of them in the first 60 hours. And that's just what's reported. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say murdered? I meant harvested. Because one is legal and okay until it's not. And it's not anymore for them. Gray wolves were restored to the ESA in February of 2022. But before you start praising Biden for reversing a Trump-era policy, let me quickly just say, don't. Wolves are still not protected in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, or the eastern side of Oregon, and certainly not Alaska. The decision to relist them actually came from a senior district judge in California, Jeffrey White, and he was first nominated by, get this, George Bush Jr., the other shitty guy that got us in a lot of wars. But now to a bunch of hunters and ranchers, Judge White is apparently an eco-activist. We can't be too surprised they'd say that, though. They said the same thing about Malloy back in 2010, even though he declined the preliminary injunction that would have stopped wolf hunting until the court date, which he ultimately ruled in favor of. Wolves were hunted for almost a full year due to this decision. And by the way, the only reason Judge White wasn't able to restore wolf protections in the tri-states as well was because of Meat Grinder John's undemocratic and disgusting actions due to that 2011 budget cut rider that prohibits any further judicial review, which is to say that it cannot be challenged in court again. Now, if someone actually cared about the viability of a species, why would they make it so that a law can't evolve with the sciences? That's quite literally anti-science. Science must be open to review. We like peer-reviewed science, and if we were to allow a theory to go unchallenged, we'd still be bloodletting for the common cold. But I guess you gotta get them demons out somehow, and you can only be sure of that when they faint from blood loss. You know, back in those good old days, some of the Jerrys like to yak about. And speaking of Jerry, Biden and his administration actually haven't done anything to protect wolves at all, even though he said on his very first day in office that he would restore them to protected status. He even brought up a heartfelt story about his grandkids and later retold that exact same story. It's almost like it was rehearsed or something. On a children's show, Brave Wilderness, in May of 2021.
One of the things that I'm getting from my grandkids, and some of them are really little, calling me saying, "Pop, they're going to kill all the wolves. They're killing the wolves, Pop. Why's that happening, Pop?"
Well, Pop, they're killing the wolves because they're ignorant and hateful, and they'll keep killing them because you approved it. 3 months after President Joe Biden said this, he backed the Trump administration's decision to end all federal protections for wolves. He's even trying to appeal the protections Judge White secured in February of 2022. It's almost like he was lying and just using his grandkids to make himself appear more human. Like he has a heart and doesn't just serve corporate interest or something. Huh. To be extra clear, and in an attempt to not be misunderstood, I'm not partisan on these issues. Both parties are terrible to the environment because the same corporations are funding them. But ignorant, hateful people make it partisan, even going as far to take the dead bodies of coyotes and laying them out to spell FJB for fuck Joe Biden. Remember what Niemeyer said? It's vengeance. But it's not like telling these fucked up sadists that Biden is actively helping to allow them to continue killing wolves, coyotes, and other animals would change their actions. They just stop using it as a talking point. There are plenty of things to be mad at Biden for. Getting back at Joe by killing coyotes and wolves because you think you'll upset him is misguided, since he's clearly never cared and has done everything in his power to do as little of what's in his power to do. Just like the concept of what many in the GOP idolize, for Uncle Sam to shut up and say nothing and let states freely govern themselves. But to what extreme? I can think of a few things in U.S. history that this concept reminds me of. But we don't even need to look back on the atrocities in our country's history to see the hypocrisy and argument in favor of states' rights. We're seeing it right now in a number of other civil matters. Simply put, states want the right to freely govern themselves so that they may openly be more fascist. We need a lot of change in this country, and in this world. Before we can achieve them, we have to first be informed, though. The main defenses we have is through education, discussions, petitions, and voting. We cannot expect our leaders to listen to us if we don't speak out and let them know that we are aware of these things and demand better. We will vote out of office all of those who choose to cram a few more dollars into their already overstuffed pockets at the detriment of the general public and our environment. It's the only way to peacefully reclaim our integrity and to move towards a more sustainable future. On the plus side, the citizens of Colorado recently voted to have wolves reintroduced to their state. Basically, this means that the Colorado government is legally required to create a plan that would bring wolves back to their ecosystems. Overall, this is really fantastic news. But as I say, the devil's in the details. Lobbyists to oppose this bill are now heavily influencing its outcome. The 2020 Proposition 114 language classifies wolves as a non-game species, which cannot be hunted. Yet the Colorado Wildlife and Parks, who's tasked to reintroduce wolves, are already discussing hunting wolves and seeking 10J permits from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that would allow them to kill wolves on taxpayer dollars. If that sounds complicated, it's because it is, and there's no way that I'll have time to discuss it all in this episode. The hearings of the CPW have been, well, we'll just say incredibly disappointing, and there's a whole lot to discuss there. I'll likely create another side episode on this just to keep you all informed. Though to put it shortly, the battle has just begun there, but fortunately, we won't have to worry about them killing wolves quite yet. The current draft of the plan is unacceptable, and not what the people of Colorado voted for, so you can be sure there will be a lot of petitions and lawsuits coming up in the near future. But let's go ahead and bring this to a close. I want to thank you all for watching this episode. It's not been easy to produce and has taken a hard emotional toll on me, but I chose this because it's important to me. If you want to help me help wolves. This is a charity project. I don't accept any donations. I would much rather you donate to the charities I feature on this show. As mentioned in part 1, Wild Earth Guardians is a featured charity for this episode, and I highly encourage you make a donation to them. Your dollar really goes a long way to facilitate the changes in the world we want to see and need to see to survive. Let's leave something behind for the next generations of Earth's future inhabitants that we can be proud of. We can do it if we make a concerted effort and try. If you'd like to learn more about the discussions in this episode, and for clear directions on what you can do to help, please visit relistwolves.org or relistwolvesnow.org. Both offer valuable resources and have simplified the process of contacting your representatives. There's even instructions for those living outside of the US on how they can assist. So please go visit their sites and fill out a petition. It'll take you 2 minutes or less, and you'd be raising your voice, or howling, for wolves. And hey, if you made it all the way through both episodes of me ranting about this, firstly, thank you. But what's 2 more minutes of your time? Please spare me a couple more. Before we go, I just want to say that there is no way I can condense over 100 years of legislation and politics concerning wolves in the United States in just 2 hours. 2 years? Big maybe. So there's a fair bit of nuance and simplification here. I've had to continually update and debate whether or not to include information as things develop, and I'm sure I'll have to create another whole episode on these matters later. Those relist wolf sites can elaborate on some of these issues, and you can also find great information from the Center of Biological Diversity, Predator Defense, Project Coyote, Wild Earth Guardians, and many more. That being said, anti-wolf, pro-hunting, and pro-ranching individuals are not my target audience. There are people who they can talk to who will have a lot more patience with them than me, and I greatly appreciate those who are trying to change their minds. That person is not me, and I have no more tolerance for their jabbering. I have wasted far too much time and exhausted myself trying to reach those individuals in a variety of different ways, only to come out feeling drained and change nothing. My time is better spent trying to reach those who want to listen, instead of attempting to reach those people who only want to scream their ignorance. They should try screaming into a pillow instead. But not my pillow, maybe their Lindell pillow, but I choose to spend my time elsewhere, where I can be more productive. Now then, we have a song. It's song time, and there's silly dancing with fursuiters, including me. By the way, I suck at dancing, but I hope you'll enjoy it anyways. Here's Good to Have Around, performed by Funky Freddy. Because yes, wolves are good to have around. Well, like 99.9% of the time. Thanks again for joining me tonight. Take care, stay healthy, and live well. All the creative content presented in this episode will be listed in the credits at the end of this video. Additional resources and links to our featured charity can be found in the description below. Ciao!
From the day I was born, I've been misjudged. They say I was vicious, cruel, and a killer. Gordon Haber stepped up and said, folks, you're all wrong. Wolves keep the balance, got to keep them around. Good to have around. Good to have around. Beavers will build. Rivers will change, coyotes will back off, nature will balance. I'm going to restore this beautiful land. I'm good to have around. Good to have around. I'm telling you, we're good to have around. Don't you know wolves are good to have around? If you lose some cattle, don't you complain. You leave them to wander unattended and lame. Just trying to do my job, I hope it helps you too. You can bet on a human, I'm good to have around. Good to have around. Good to have around.